Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Really pleased to have you with us. We're really excited about the launch of the Cyber and Fraud Information Sharing Network. It's something we've been working on in the Cyber and Fraud Working Group at PASA for a number of months, if not years, actually, trying to develop this. So it's fantastic that we're finally getting off the ground, and it's so great to see that we've got over 50 people should be attending the webinar this morning. So really, really fantastic. Just a bit of background, I'm Tim Robinson. I chair the Cyber and Fraud Working Group at PASA. For my day job, I'm a partner at Crow. I head up our cyber and fraud services there. Really pleased to be joined by a couple of my working group companions. So Sean Roberts, who's the CISO at Railpen, Gillian Baker, who is Financial Risk Management Lead at Hyman's, and then we've got Paul Sturgis, who is our PASA board sponsor. Well, exiting PASA board sponsor, Paul has certainly done his time. He's contributed a significant amount getting this network off the ground and supporting the working group with this. So really pleased to have Paul here with us. Just a bit of context about what we're going to do this morning. So we'll have a bit of a run through and context itself about what we intend to do with the information sharing network, why you'd want to be part of it, and how you can get involved in it. So I'll do a bit of context around that. And we're going to throw it open. Gillian and Sean are going to provide a bit of colour and flavour around the types of incidents, scenarios, information that we'd like to receive from you guys and how we'd share that back with you. And Paul's here more from a observing perspective. If you've got any questions, and that's really an important bit from this morning, don't think we're going to take the full hour to get through the presentation. And caveat this, if you did attend our kind of soft launch a couple of weeks ago in the Crow office in London, we'll be covering some of the same bases there. But please do ask questions throughout. We can't see you, so sorry if this seems a bit stilted. We're kind of just talking to a camera at the moment. But please do ask as many questions as possible, and we can see them come through in the back end, and we'll try and cover as many as possible at the end of the session. We are recording this morning's session, so if colleagues are unable to attend, or there's people you think it would be really great for them to attend this in the future, then we will be sharing that in the follow-up email afterwards, so please do forward that on if you like. And that's it, so we'll get moving on. Sorry, I should just say as well, we've been helped this morning, and we've been helped in the last couple of months to the build up to this by Lucy and Helen at PASA. They've been fantastic in terms of getting email invites out, setting up this webinar this morning, and they are supporting in the back end. So Lucy, without further ado, can you push us on to the next slide, please? So just a bit of context about our thought process in establishing this group. Obviously, we're all professionals in these areas across cybersecurity and fraud. That's what we're trying to develop, a real information sharing network, and to raise best practice here. So I don't think any of these statistics that we've got up on screen will be unheard of for you guys, but we just wanted to really kind of establish that and push home again. So some interesting facts whenever you look at these. A recent IMF report predicted that the cybercrime will cost £23 trillion globally by 2027, 175% growth rate. So that's an increase, that's 175% growth rate increase since 2022 levels of cybercrime. And there's some UK specific statistics down there. I think actually in the last week, the UK's actually released some updated stats on cyber breaches. I think it came out the last day in April, but I had a look at these stats, and the ones which we used in our previous presentation are identical. There's been no reduction, let's put it that way. So over 40% of businesses impacted in the cyber breaches survey have been impacted by cyber attacks. That's almost 30% again for charities, and we've seen this huge acceleration in the last few years where cybercrime has helped accelerate different types of fraud, and certainly the tactics which are being used. So when we were thinking about this group, and it's certainly been on the working group's mind, the impact of cyber attacks across the operational, legal, reputational piece, and the importance for our roles as professionals in the sector to raise standards around this. How can we do that? Well, sharing intelligence is a fantastic step we've seen a massive evolution in the last couple of years, and we're still going through it with AI kind of acceleration and the types of tactics that cyber criminals and threat actors are using. Cybercrime as a service has really reduced the barriers of entry into this industry. So we're fighting a tough battle here. And of course, in terms of the setup of the sector and how we're supporting our clients, there's a significant element of third-party here, third-party risk management. When we're looking at it from an administrative perspective, it's also third parties, but down the line from a trustee point of view and thinking from a scheme side, which I predominantly work in, is those fourth and fifth parties as well. So massive risk piece. How do we get to grips with it? And hopefully you'll agree with us that having a forum like this is a fantastic way of sharing up-to-date information or learnings from previous near misses or elements that have happened before. Lucy, can you push us onto that slide, please? So I won't go into detail again here. I think you're all going to understand that the impact of cyber attacks and fraud in the sector. The one thing I would say is we're quite unique in the sense that there's a lot to leverage there. So obviously ransomware attacks and other tactics like that, there's a significant leverage around member consequences. And when we're supporting our clients, that's a critical element to it. So the downside could be income payments suspended, it could be member benefits suspended, cash out suspended, death claims delayed, retirement lump sums frozen, investment switches halted, transfer values blocked. The list is really quite long. So it's not like this risk is reducing, that's going to stay there. So it's really about kind of how we raise that resilience now. Lucy, next slide, please. Right, so just a bit of background around why we're doing this as well. So a critical thing is really around the industry learning collectively here. So really important piece there. Certainly it's around building solutions and strategies to raise security, and potentially it's learnings from near misses or incidences which are actually ongoing and shared across different organizations in the sector. So tips or actually strategies about identifying how we can plug gaps and plug risks. Certainly the group is confidential. So we've spent a lot of time, and that's probably been one of the key reasons about how long it's taken for us to establish this network, is making sure that we've got that confidentiality as core and that everyone is comfortable that they can share this information confidentially and via an anonymized kind of setup. And Gillian's going to go into detail around the pro forma we've established, and also we've got some quite robust terms and conditions before joining the network in the future. And it has a comprehensive scope. So we're really looking at both elements here that go hand in hand. So we've got cyber professionals joining the network, but we've also got fraud professionals joining the network. Lucy, can you push us on, please? Again, this isn't going to be unusual for anyone on this call, so I don't think I'm going to go into a huge amount of detail here. But what we have done is we've learned, and certainly Sean and other individuals on the working group have had insight into these types of networks in other sectors. Certainly in banking and financial services, we've seen that these networks really generate a lot of value in information sharing. I'm having a discussion next week with the Lloyd's Market Association. They have a CISO forum there, which has been established for a number of years. So we will be thinking about how we can open this group up as well, learn somewhat from other sectors. So there might be individuals who sit on those forums can come to our group as well and contribute, and vice versa. Next slide, please, Lucy. And again here, I don't think there's anything which you wouldn't have seen on the other slides. The piece that I really want to get home though is how often we'll be hosting the network, how it kind of technically will work. So we're intending to host this on a quarterly basis. It will be remote. It'll probably be a 90-minute session. And we're expecting that we're going to be hosting this via Teams. So This morning's webinar we've hosted on GoToWebinar. That's PASA's webinar platform for events. It allows us to do the emailing, the kind of marketing element, and get that juicy data back and send out those automated emails. But I think in terms of the forum, what we want to generate is more of a two-way discussion around this. So certainly you'll be submitting items for us to discuss, but we want everyone involved in the network to contribute. So all people will be on camera if you're happy to be, and also verbally you can contribute to that. And we do have our first date in the diary, so we'll let you know at the end of the webinar when that is. Lucy, I think it's next line. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Gillian just to cover off our pro forma and a few other items. Thanks, Gillian.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, everyone. I'm Gillian Baker from Hymans Robertson, and I've been with the working group, the Cybercrime and Fraud Working Group, since its inception, so that's over 6 years ago. So to get to this point today is so exciting for us all, and I'm really pleased that you're here with us to hear about the launch today. So I know from the face-to-face launch that we had in April that a lot of the attendees were keen to know the detail of what our pro forma would look like. So the next couple of slides, I've got some detail of that. And just like Tim and his slides, I'm not going to go through everything word for word because there's a lot of detail here, but you will get a copy of the slides afterwards and can have a look at it in your own time. So first of all, this pro forma has been prepared to support you in submitting cases to us. It's a structured template for confidentially sharing information about cybercrime and fraud, and that's all the different events that you'd like to share with us, and that'll be shared with the network. Sean put all the work into developing this, and it's been set up as a Microsoft form, and everything shared via the form will be anonymous. I'll come on to that again in a second. So right up front, you'll see at the very top of the form, we have emphasised respecting legal and privacy obligations when sharing data with the network. And we've prepared this wording with input from our legal representatives on the working group, who might actually be on the webinar today as well. So the key points of this sort of caveat up front. First of all, reporting via our network does not mean you forgo your legal and regulatory obligations to report to the appropriate authorities or agencies. So that's a key point, and one of the questions actually we had in the face-to-face launch in April. And secondly, the data shared needs to be anonymous, both to protect yourselves and your firms, but also to protect any individuals that could be involved in the fraud or the cybercrime scenario, and as well to mitigate the risk of any tipping off. So please be aware, of that type of caveat as part of the network sharing. We do acknowledge this may be one of your main concerns in signing up to the network, the anonymity of what we're doing. So if you have got any questions about this particular aspect, please share them with us and we can answer them as best we can today. Right, so to begin with, the very first section of the pro forma, which is the bottom half of my slide, we're just looking for some basic details up front about the incident. So a short title or description, whatever you want to call it, the date and time of the event, the type of event that's occurred, who or what was impacted, and then how the incident was identified. Can I have the next slide, please, Lucy? Okay, then we're looking for details of the activity itself. So for example, what tools, techniques or tactics were employed? What procedures or resources were used? And how was the event triggered? For example, was it a phishing email that was received? Or from a fraud perspective, was it maybe documents being received via post? So that's the type of information we'd like there. Now, specifically, if it's a cyber event, which is the second half of the pro forma again on the slide. First of all, Sean has kindly signposted you all to MITRE ATT&CK to help you consider what's actually occurred and what to share with us. So if you want to have a look at that information again in your own time, it's a really useful signpost that Sean's given you there. We'll then ask for a detailed account of what has happened. If you've got any idea of the reasons behind the incident, and then any mitigations undertaken initially. Next slide, please, Lucy. Thanks, Lucy. Okay, if it's a fraud event, similarly, we've signposted you this time to Action Fraud, or as is now, Report Fraud, for some guidance in identifying the type of fraud that you might have seen. And that's to help you give us more details when you report it to us and help you consider the specifics that you'd like to share. So again, for a fraud event, give us a detailed description of what's actually happened, what fraud techniques were employed, what do you think was the motivation behind the fraud event, and again, what mitigation measures have been considered or implemented. Next slide, please, Lucy. Okay, next we ask you to consider the impact of the event on things like your systems, your operations, your data, but also your members. Then to share with us details of any actions taken in response to the event. Once the incident has been resolved, what key findings were identified, and what lessons learned did you take away to hopefully avoid similar issues happening in the future? Then finally, what do you think would be useful hints and tips to share with others via the network? You can provide as much or as little detail as you'd like when sharing data with us, but obviously the more information you share, the more useful it would be to others in the network. So as Lucy has now put onto the screen, I've got an example of a fraud incident here for information. So again, I'm not going to go through it in loads of detail because you can look at it in your own time. But this particular example relates to a case of impersonation fraud. This is actually very topical at the moment, because you're probably all aware that the regulator issued in March this year a specific alert around impersonation fraud. It actually followed an initial alert they issued in September last year, so everyone should be mindful now of the risk of impersonation fraud. So just a couple of specifics I wanted to talk through in this example. If we look first of all at the tactics involved, this was a case of bank detail changes being requested at the same time as an address change. So that is a red flag in itself. So something obviously that you're all aware of. But in this particular example as well, it was identified a use of overseas IP addresses when the fraudster was in contact with the firm via email. Looking at some of the mitigations deployed once the incident was first identified, this included putting in place enhanced due diligence of cases, but also additional peer review. Now, the impacts of the incident included re-verification failures occurring as a result of the enhanced due diligence. So that was a successful mitigation put in place to begin with. And unfortunately, in this case, one payment did manage to go through. Sorry, 2 seconds. Right, so jumping down to the findings for this particular example. This event identified a high standard of false documentation having been provided, so that's useful to share with the network. And one of the recommendations in this particular case for others to consider includes reviewing member identification verification processes and tools. Now, I just wanted to have a wee plug for another PASA working group that I'm a member of, just in relation to IDV. The Identity Management Working Group did issue some guidance back in July last year with suggested best practice on identity verification checks to be performed at the whole life cycle of a member's pension journey. So if you haven't looked at that already, that would be a useful document to have a look at. So what's on screen is just one example of the types of things we'd like you to share with us, but just a couple of other ideas of things that we'd like to see. So for example, cases of family fraud. If a family member is claiming benefits in a deceased case instead of a genuine beneficiary, that's fraud. We want to know about it. Also, examples of faked deaths. So sometimes a family member could pretend one of the family members has died in order to claim benefits. Again, that's something we want to know about. South African cases are also a particular concern, and that's in terms of intercepting mail over in South Africa, undertaking impersonation fraud as a result, or again, the fake death scenario. The South African cases are particularly relevant just now because the regulator did refer to that in their alert that was issued in March. Another thing we'd like to be aware of is vulnerable customers. If you've got cases of, for example, abuse of power of attorney agreements that might be in place, that's fraud, we want to know. But also if a care worker is taking advantage of a member when coming into their home, again, that's the type of thing to share. And the final thing we are interested in is the risk of internal fraud. So all of your employees will have access to a lot of data, so they could be tempted to use that maliciously and attempt any of the other types of fraud I've just talked about there in this session. So again, if that occurs, we'd like to know some of the details of that. So on that lovely cheerful note, I'd like to hand you over to Sean, who can give you some more details from the cyber perspective. Over to you, Sean.
Thank you, Gillian. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sean Roberts. I'm the CISO at Railpen. I'm also, as Tim introduced me as a member of the Cybercrime and Fraud Working Group, and it's really great to see you all here today. I think we've had a really good attendance. So I'm going to start with a question to bring some of this to life. And sorry, I should have said, can we have the slide to move on as well, please? Thank you. So I want to start with a question. So if you suffered a cyber attack that disrupted your operations and ended up delaying member payments, we already know that would be horrific. So and that's not the question, but now imagine that I told you I had experienced similar 2 months earlier, and that we had identified a really simple or a simple change that reduced the likelihood and the impact. How would that make you feel? Now the question, and obviously I can't see you all, but the question is, would that feel helpful? I'm hoping right now that you're all shaking your heads. So what makes this uncomfortable is not the incident itself, it's the thought that harm might have been reduced or even prevented if the information had been shared with the right people in time so that they could take action. So I'm going to focus, before I get into this slide, a little bit more on Tim's message, and that's sharing cyber and fraud intelligence as an industry really does help us protect the people that depend on us. When members entrust an organization with their future, they expect 3 things: that the data remains secure, services continue when needed, risks are managed proactively, not reactively. Now, cyber attacks, as I'm sure you're all aware, undermine that trust when organizations are caught unaware or just isolated. So in reality, most attacks do not really stay neatly contained to one victim. The same infrastructure, the same techniques, the same lures are often reused across multiple organizations within that same sector. So the real question isn't whether or not others may be targeted within that sector, it's whether or not they're going to be warned with actionable intelligence to take action in time. And that is why trusted sharing really does matter. Now, as Tim stated, other sectors have already built mature ways of doing this through information sharing and analysis centers, or otherwise known as ISACs. These exist, as Tim said, in financial services, healthcare, government, and many more. So on the screen, it depicts an example of a fictional incident, really, I guess, cognizant of the reporting that will occur within your organization if you were to face such an incident. But there's a lot of information from that others can learn from, that we hope you'll be comfortable sharing. So the what happened, the tactics involved, motivation if known, I think it's really important, mitigation measures that may flag that an incident has occurred so others can then build in those defensive monitoring capabilities. Any key response information that may help others respond fast to reduce that dwell time, and then any recommendations just more generally for others to help them protect themselves. So we recognize, as has already been mentioned, that sharing such information is likely to be a cause for concern. You may require, or it will require, probably more thought and consideration from within your own organization before you do share. And that is why it's really important that the information, as Gillian described, remains anonymous. It is about responsible sharing. We're really reliant, though, on you and your involvement to make this initiative successful. So I guess the key message, if I was to leave you with one today, the key message would be: defending against cyber attacks and fraud is not an individual discipline per se. It really is a collective endeavor. The stronger alignment across our industry advances our collective protection to our members. And other sectors have already proven that this works, that trusted information sharing is not just useful after an incident, it really does help reduce harm before it spreads. So one organization's experience can become another organization's protection. Thank you. I think it's back to you, Tim.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Gillian. That was really excellent. Lucy, can we just push on the slides, please? Right, so who can actually get involved? Well, this is open to all PASA corporate members. Just to come to say, we're looking for specialists from both a cyber security perspective, but also from a fraud perspective, certainly from detection and response capabilities as well. So that's fantastic. If there are individuals in your organization who probably have more of a strategic oversight around these areas as well, or kind of governance and risk roles, then we certainly welcome those individuals in as well. Okay, Lucy, next slide, please. So really that brings us to kind of wrapping up the context and what we're trying to achieve with the group. Hopefully we've got across the point that what we're trying to achieve is really support a more connected, informed and proactive security community, and certainly help raise some best practice across the industry and in turn raise resilience with that. As I mentioned, please do ask some questions. I don't think we've had many come in as of yet, but hopefully that means we've done an excellent job and it's all quite self-explanatory what we're trying to achieve here, but do ask a couple of the questions. Right, next steps though. So how do you actually get involved and join the network? So after this webinar, we're going to be following up. It'll probably be next week when these emails come up, but a thank you for attending today. You'll have a copy of this webinar as well, the recording, but we'll also be sending out a quite detailed terms and conditions for joining the network. All we really need back from you is to register your interest to be a member by emailing CFISN@pasa-uk.com, rolls off the tongue, and we'll come back to you in terms of just confirming your membership moving forward. But then it really is, like Sean said, we need you guys to get involved in this. We need you to be sharing that information with us so we can get it out to the group. Longer term, I think that will be, obviously we want to understand those near misses and ongoing items that you might be dealing with, but also this is going to be a route for us to share best practice out wider than this network. So it might be that if there are ongoing incidents going, can share our interim communications between these quarterly meetings, which get out to everyone that way. And it also might be that it feeds into our wider guidance that we can put out to PASA members as well. So really, really critical there that you're involved in this and you're sharing this information back with us. Now, please save this in your diary. So our first meeting is going to be hosted on Wednesday, the 15th of July. It's going to be 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. in the morning. As I mentioned, it's highly likely this will be on Teams, so you will be able to join in the discussion. We'll have more of an engaged discussion that route. But please do follow up with us. Right, I'm just checking. Have we had any other questions come in?
I think there's one come in, Tim.
Yep.
Sean, I think this one might be for you. Could you give us some more information about MITRE attack? We're not really aware of that to date, so some information would be useful.
Yeah, sure. So the MITRE attack framework is an initiative. It's been around for a good number of years now, and it basically provides a framework to identify what's known as TTPs, so the tactics, techniques, and procedures attackers use, or commonly use, or is being in successful breaches. So it's got some really useful information. The reason that it's within the pro forma to guide responses is because, and it does look complicated. So when you do have a look at how it's all broken down, but it really does enable us to share very specific information in an anonymous fashion, but that can be taken by other organizations, and it is actionable. It will help build in those defenses, or I guess the ability to monitor and identify something untoward is going on. So that's a really poor description of what MITRE attack is. It's a great initiative. Please do take a look at it. It is very useful, and they've got various versions of it for different use cases. You could have for enterprise, for Windows explicitly, for Azure. There's some really useful information, especially from a cyber defence perspective.
Great, thank you.
Tim, I've seen one that relates to other people who might not be here today. Pensions is a small world, isn't it? If I illustrate on the questions raised, you know, people know lots of people. If people know other people in the industry who aren't attending that this might be of interest, is it okay for them to refer that on? I think the answer is probably yes, but I'll let you answer.
Definitely. I think one of the key elements we're trying to get here is voices from as many perspectives as possible. So please do share this on. Certainly at this point, it seems like we've got a fantastic turnout for today. Shame we can't have everyone on camera so you can all share in this, but it's really fantastic to see that we've had so many people go out from our initial launch back in their organisations and get the right kind of people in the room here today. But please do share it further and wider. It's only going to be as good as what people contribute to it. So definitely on that side.
I think we've got another one in, Tim. Yep. Do you want me to read it out, Tim?
Yeah, could you please, Gillian?
Okay. Are there any other resources or supporting documents, such as the IDV working group document that Gillian mentioned, that members should be aware of or refer to support cyber and fraud disruption across their customer journeys?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, wider than this group, obviously, there's other working groups, and Gillian alluded to that. There's been some fantastic guidance put out in the last couple of months. And I definitely recommend you go and look at that IDV guidance. I've certainly been working through it with a third-party administrator recently, looking at that guidance and good practice guide 45 from the government at the moment to really see if we're up to current standards. So that's great. Thinking back from a cyber and fraud perspective, the working group output has been limited in the last few years. We'll be quite transparent with that. That's not a fault of us not meeting up on a regular point and having discussions to move these things forward. That just has been a point of really, it's been reflective of the regulatory environment around TPR and putting out information, and we've responded to that as and when. Certainly what on our agenda moving forward is to update that guidance around cybersecurity and learnings we've taken forward. So again, contributions to this working group are going to help us do that, and really we'll include that within it. But do look back at the guidance that's already available through PASA if you haven't seen that before. It's still certainly helpful at a baseline level. We are also working on some internal guidance around fraud, about what to do in the event of a fraud. So we'll be launching that in the near future as well.
I think that's an important point, Tim, because if you look at what happened in retail, you know, it was no accident, was it, that M&S got hit, and then the Co-op got hit, and then Harrods got hit. You know, people aren't going to attack one pensions administrator and then stop, particularly if it's successful. They're going to very quickly go for everybody else. And, you know, whereas I could make a decision not to buy my groceries at Marks and Spencer's, members don't have that ability, do they, as you touched in a slide earlier. You know, and trustees, to be fair, it's no mean feat moving an administrator, particularly in those circumstances. So we've really got to be on the front foot with it.
We certainly do, and I mean, there's a live example of that. In Australia, a number of the large superannuation funds, they were all targeted at the same time last year. So we can pick that up, and you can see those tactics. Certainly, these threat actors do that. They focus on different sectors at a time. So it's really critical, that.
Tim, we've got another question in.
Yep.
How do you plan to share intelligence outside of the meetings and any downstream PASA guidance?
Yes, so in terms of your membership to this network, obviously you'll be on a mailing list off the back of it. Obviously, as a PASA corporate member, individuals within your organisation will get alerts when new guidance is put out. But we do intend, if there's learnings off the back of the discussions we have at the meetings, or these are really critical kind of ongoing incidents where we've gained really useful intelligence, and that's interim to meetings, we will do direct mailings out to the members, and obviously think about doing written kind of updates or guidance, which we can put out through PASA.
And we could also do that ad hoc meetings if we really needed to, can't we, Tim? Pick out the timeliness of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the flexibility of the kind of remote element that we can host these meetings and we can respond and be quite agile in that sense. And it was remiss of me earlier, I should have mentioned, we can't have all 8 people who have contributed to the working group the last few years on the call today. It would have been a bit overkill, but I should just mention other working group members. So Sharon Squires, who's the Operational Risk Associate and Fraud Investigations Officer at WTW, Alex Irvine, who's the Regulatory and Criminal Investigations Lawyer at Stevenson Harwood, and Joanna Laley, who's the Cyber Lead at Stevenson Harwood LLP as well. And then more recently, Jane Pocock, who's our next board sponsor once Paul steps away in a couple of months' time, but also her day job is at Clara Pensions. So we've got a real good mix of cybersecurity and fraud expertise within that working group, and it's really helpful that everyone has contributed significantly in the last few months to get this off the ground. A point on that agility there is you'll see familiar faces out of that working group hosting these meetings, but it does allow us, it's not always got to be the same person or the same couple of people who are chairing the meetings. We've got the flexibility there, which we can pull in people and so forth.
Thanks, Tim.
Got another question. Do you want me to read it out for you, Tim?
Yes, please.
How are we seeing trustee and scheme sponsors' interest in cybercrime change?
Certainly am. So predominantly I work with DB and some DC schemes as well. The last couple of years I've seen a huge transition, and obviously incidents in the sector, but incidents which are getting headlines in the news. I've seen a huge transition where trustees, this is their kind of, it's number one risk on their risk register. It's a discussion piece at either audit and risk committee meetings or full board meetings on a quarterly basis. And certainly that governance across the whole third-party piece, but certainly the administrator is critical for that, either in-house administration teams or third-party administrators. So that real desire to understand and assess cyber risk in the industry has increased massively, how we can respond to that, manage that risk, and also effectiveness of incidents. I think that the understanding and awareness and knowledge from the trustee group particularly has really increased significantly the last few years. So they're aware that unfortunately you can put every piece of security in place, and we're talking about fraud controls as well as cyber controls here, but things do happen. So how do we respond to that to hopefully reduce the impact of it? That has changed significantly. So I mean, I'm speaking from a perspective, a lot of my clients are usually the larger size schemes, but I have seen that drip down to smaller schemes as well, trustee ones, and certainly irrespective now, it's kind of number one risk or a key risk for schemes to be managing. Yeah.
And just
and
to
on
add
that
to that
point, I was chatting to a trustee at the launch event of a smaller scheme, and one of the challenges they had was the regulator contacted them to say, after the well-known incident a couple of years ago where an administrator had a very bad cyber attack, the trustee, the CPR, the regulator contacted them and said, so, you know, what are you doing about it? And their difficulty was, of course, they didn't know the detail of the event. They knew there'd been an event, it was all over the press with Capita, but they didn't know it. And this is one of these networks that will help them do it. The pensions regulator is really positive and supportive of this. They won't be attending, and they understand that. That's purely for the reason that we don't want to create any obstacle to the nature of the data that might be shared in that environment. But they are very supportive, and they will be very interested to know that people are joining the network and that protection happens.
And I was just going to say, Paul, it's within third-party administration at Hyman's, I know our clients are asking for not quite training sessions, but comfort at their trustee meetings. You know, for me, for example, to go along and give them some comfort around the cyber and fraud controls that we've got in place to help protect their data. So I do a lot of sessions, you know, like that, just to let them know what we've got in place, give them that comfort that we've got excellent controls in place, and just try and make sure that they're happy working with us and trust us to protect their data. So yeah, we see that from clients of all sizes as well. Okay.
I think we've had one question. It might be a good one for you, Sean, actually, from a CISO perspective here. Looking at the threats in totality, do you feel there are adequate vendor solutions in place to combat fraud and cyber threats across the pension sector? Interesting one, and maybe we're getting a bit off topic, and this might be one for the future, where maybe we include vendors like this down the line who can talk about where the industry is moving. Certainly, Mythos caused a storm the last few weeks, hasn't it?
It has.
Yeah. How do you feel?
It's a great question, and I guess for the vendors out there, so vendors are sprouting up like mushrooms. They're all offering a solution to your problem. Do they all work natively together? Do they enable that telemetry to be able to respond automatically rather than manually? Do they require a lot of manual resource and intervention to make the use of them while you're trying to also manage lots of other vendor solutions? So I wish there was a simple answer. There certainly isn't. I guess part of, and apologies if you can hear my dogs in the background. Somebody's at the door. It's quite off-putting, but yeah, I guess one part of what we can do within this information sharing network is to discuss those. What vendors are we seeing that are actually working and supporting and making a difference for us in our day-to-day kind of operations? I think there's a lot to learn from that. I know certainly over the last few years there has been a strive to reduce the number of vendors you have, but ensuring the vendors you have do provide more capabilities, so that you've kind of got what's called a mesh being covered by a fewer number of providers. But great question, one that we can discuss probably for hours, but yeah, thank you.
I think on that point it's probably sensible, and I know Gillian, we've discussed it quite a lot in the last year or two around these ID verification and biometrics tools, and that's something which I spent a lot of time on in the last couple of years. But it would be remiss of me not to mention that there is actually another webinar next week which people might be interested in. So it's coming out of the ID Management Working Group. Title is Inbox Under Threat, and it's a focus on how to reduce fraud risk, improve data accuracy, and deliver trusted member communications. It's taking place at 11 AM next Wednesday, the 13th of May. So do look out for that if that's of interest to you. I really recommend you get on that. That working group has put out some really useful information recently. I think that'll be a great one to attend. Okay.
I think there's one other question, Tim. Do you have to be a PASA member to join the network?
So yeah, you do need corporate membership from PASA to join the network. There might be some special cases, like we said, where we're looking for individuals outside of the sector to contribute as well, and that might be one-off meetings they attend to kind of share kind of insights from their areas of expertise. But we'll take that by a case-by-case basis. If you don't have PASA membership, please do get in touch though, or if you know people who are in that case, and we can kind of review that on a case-by-case basis, or talk through some maybe other options. Yeah.
There's another question. As a cybersecurity lead for a pensions administrator, we see lots of security incident fraud that starts with poor member cyber hygiene, data protection. Is this committee looking to provide market reports, guidance to members, trustees and administrators? Current national guidance, whilst good, doesn't cover the cyber hygiene and issues we are seeing in the industry using the technologies we are using.
I think sorry, Jenny.
I was just going to say, Tim, I think we were asked a similar question at the face-to-face launch, and what we said there was, as a result of people sharing information with us, if we do start to see trends or something we think is an issue or a serious concern, we will put something out there via PASA, just to say, as a result of our network sharing, we've identified an issue, we want to share that with you. So we need to obviously build up the intel to be able to do that trend analysis. But yeah, if there's anything imperative we think we need to share, we will do so. Tim, was there anything you were going to add on that?
I don't think I could add anything else to that, Gillian. Thank you.
One point I would add to it is not many people are aware of this, but the TPR have published their data strategy. So their data strategy is all about supporting administrators to innovate. It does include mention of AI. I think all the guidance these days does, but it's all about ensuring better quality of data to support member outcomes or saver outcomes. So it's definitely worth having a look at. I appreciate it probably doesn't go into the extent that you've asked the question. I think the question, David, it was from yourself, but it's a good place to start. And as Gillian said, through this information sharing network, potentially, yeah, we can publish more.
There's a further question that I might address, if I may, and the question is: could we attempt to align SPP, TPR, and PASA on this? I'm part of other discussion, another discussion. We are all working in parallel, trying to achieve similar things. And I guess what I say about that, because it's more of a PASA level question, we've worked closely with the TPR on this particular initiative. Tim, in particular, has had quite a number of discussions with the TPR to achieve exactly what the person raising that question has asked. PASA does have a dialogue with other professional bodies periodically on particular initiatives with the view of trying to tie those two things together. I can't speak for what SPP dialogue has happened with PASA recently, because that's not something I'm involved with, but those things do happen to try and sometimes align things. We've done it on consultations where we've got a really significant consultation and we're trying to get a consistent message across. So we do align with the other professional bodies. I would argue that as this risk primarily lands in the administration spot, PASA would be the natural home for looking at it, but that isn't to say we wouldn't be very happy to talk to other professional bodies in that space.
Thanks, Paul. I think that's about it then. We're kind of thank you everyone for attending this morning and contributing with those questions. If you do have any other further questions off the back of this, then feel free to get in touch via that email we shared on the slides. And of course, when we follow up next week, you have a copy of that and instructions on the next actions as well. But really hoping that we get to see you all in July for our first meeting. Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.